Hello. You should first know that I was too short, so I'm standing on a Dell computer back here, which is great. It's a good thing because it allows me not to take myself too seriously. Can already tell that I'm a little shaky. This is my first time doing this. Thank you for having me. I have never publicly spoken before, so I'm hoping it falls somewhere between Melania and Michelle. Okay. It can't get worse than Melania. That's what I'm telling myself. My name is Allyn, and I'm going to talk to you today about the idea of chasing what you love. When Celie first approached me, my initial reaction was a mix of slight confusion and abject terror. There are a lot of reasons behind that. To start, I'm not a trained creative. I wish you could have seen the first round of this PowerPoint. And I've also never spoken publicly, so why would I speak at a creative morning? I'm wired to be logical and strategic. I love organization and structure. I'm definitely not what you would call an emotional open book. I feel deeply, but it's not something I wear on my sleeve. I am also reading off of paper up here, so excuse me. I feel compelled to find purpose and meaning in everything that happens, and this usually takes place on a very private level for me. Sharing these thoughts with the public has not really been a part of my narrative up until this point. Bottom line, I've always thought of myself as being more pragmatic than emotional, and although I apply my logic to the oftentimes illogical and emotionally driven world of the creativity, it seems strange to be chosen for this. So I said, maybe. Then I began to think about the topic of love. I kept circling back to this idea of chasing what you love and what it meant, and I realized that I was actually in a pretty good position to be here with you today. 4.5 years ago, I took a job in Nike Design as an assistant, and from there moved to project coordinator, and from there to project manager. My current role is that of design content producer and culture. It's a pretty amazing fit for me. Part project manager producer, part strategy, and part creative. I work with 700 of the most brilliant designers in the world, and my job is to make them fall in love with design every day, over and over. Technically, my job is about defining and driving culture, passion, curiosity, beliefs, and humor. But really, my job is about love, chasing it, finding it, and making room for it. I've learned that love is not a commodity. It is emotional and analog. It is far more about behavior than strategy and logic. It's demanding and it's difficult, but it is a key component for creativity. If you don't feed creativity, you won't get it in return. Input equals output. Everyone thinks that design is fun, and it is, but everybody in this room knows that it can also be incredibly hard and that the fun part can get overwhelmed by the business, deadlines, workloads, and life. I loved my job, and like so many other things in my life, including my social calendar, I had a regimented strategy laid out for how to tackle the challenge. One event for fun, followed by a workshop that would engage and allow time to create, and then bring in a speaker to inspire. I approached it like a recipe for baking, and it seemed to be working just fine. In a world where there are so many other things we are inclined and supposed to chase after, careers, beauty, boyfriends, creature comforts, I came to the realization that I had fallen in love with something that was definitely not on the usual list of suspects. Something that changed my life. It changed the way I saw my friends and family. It changed the lens through which I view the world. It also changed the way I approached my job. I had fallen in love with cancer. Allow me to elaborate. Almost exactly 1 year ago today, I was confronted with what was to become a very interesting month and an even more intense year. Within a 3-week period of time, my nearly 6-year relationship came to an end. I had moved out of my home and onto an air mattress at my best friend's office and had an incredibly shocking, mostly accidental diagnosis of breast cancer. Getting diagnosed with cancer is a strange thing, and an experience that nothing can possibly prepare you for. My journey with cancer is not the same as anybody else's, and I don't pretend to be an expert on the topic or to have any of the answers to it, but I'd like to share my story. I went back and forth with this portion of my talk and rewrote it about 15 times. In the end, I decided to shy away from going into the details regarding the procedures and involving you in all the minutiae. If there's anybody in the audience who has any questions at all regarding more in-depth information about my experience, I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. Instead, I'm going to focus on the emotional and transformational aspects of my journey. I was living my life and suddenly, in the blink of an eye, everything changed. I felt something in my left breast and went into the doctor's office for a manual exam, which led to mammograms and ultrasounds, which in turn led to a biopsy. It was then that I found out I had one of the most dangerous diseases on the planet growing inside of my body. Within a 30-hour window, I went from being a completely healthy woman whose only previous experience in the hospital was in 5th grade when I broke my finger sliding down the staircase in a sleeping bag, to a woman who has cancer. I will never forget the feeling I had of the world stopping and the ground being pulled from under me when my doctor called and said, "Oh my God, Allyn, this is not the call I wanted to make. Your test results came back positive for cancer." I don't remember much else about that conversation, besides saying over and over again, "I don't understand, what does it mean?" and asking repeatedly, "Am I dying?" That weekend and the 4 months to follow are a bit of a blur, and honestly, a lot of it is hard to remember. I went into my project managing mode, except for this time the project was my survival. 5 weeks after my diagnosis was my first surgery. I had decided to move forward with a bilateral mastectomy with reconstruction because that was the option that removed not only the cancer, but any chance it had of coming back. I spent a week recovering at my friend's house with my sister, and most of that time thinking. I was amazed at my body and what it was capable of going through. I was awestruck by the amount of love and support I had received from friends, families, and strangers. I had an awareness that I hadn't before. I was more myself than I ever had been. 2 weeks after my surgery, I moved into my new apartment, and a week after that, had a trip with my mother and family. I was back at work 3 weeks after my surgery because I could not stay away. I wanted to keep the momentum. I threw a huge party for making it to 35 and also wanted to celebrate all of the people that had shown me love along the way through this crazy journey. I was moving from one thing to the next without slowing down for a single moment. After my birthday, my body had had adequate time to rest, and I became focused on prepping for my second surgery. I tried talking my plastic surgeon into scheduling it in December so I could start the new year off with a clean slate. Because I had done such a good job preparing and recovering from the first one, he agreed. And so it was, after only 4 months from when I was diagnosed with cancer, that I was given a clean bill of health and was back to normal. My new normal, anyway. The journey was an emotional roller coaster, so many beautiful moments and some filled with utter sadness and loss. Through it all, one thing remained constant. I had had a goal of being healthy, and I kept pushing forward, not allowing anything to stand in my way. Those 4 months had flown by so fast that I didn't have time to realize the impact until it was long over. I barely had time to process the fact that I had cancer, much less the fact that I was now a cancer survivor. It's something I'm still grappling with a bit today, if I'm perfectly honest. Almost every day I ask myself, how can I maintain that feeling of what it was like to walk up to the edge? How do I keep my priorities as to what really matters? How can I move forward hanging on to the idea that every project, interaction, and experience could be the last one I have? How do I keep love front and center? Here are some things I've learned that I know to be true. Obstacles are opportunities. Life will probably never be easy, and that's okay. Terrible things are going to happen, but can serve as opportunities to show you what you're made of, if you let them. This is a photo of one of my favorite books of all time. Anyone who knows me in this room knows that I read all the time, so that actually means something. It's a book of short stories about leaders and entrepreneurs throughout history who were extraordinarily successful in the face of overwhelming obstacles. Cut the noise. It is important to be open to input, but follow your instincts. You are your own best advocate. This is particularly true for me because if I hadn't followed my instincts and all of my doctors hadn't followed theirs, I wouldn't be standing up here cancer-free today. It probably wouldn't have even been discovered for 10 years when the normal mammograms start taking place, and who knows by then where it would have spread. Also, everyone has an opinion, and they will probably share it with you, whether you want them to or not. But I think it's important to listen to your inner voice, even though we are oftentimes taught to ignore it. We are the person who knows ourselves best. People are good, but also weird. Love them anyway, they are doing their best. Also, almost anything will be funny someday. Yes, that is a picture of Raquel Welch. 2 days after I was diagnosed with cancer, my mother sent me this photo in a text that said, "If you lose your hair to chemotherapy, I'll shave my head too. At least there's cute wigs." It wasn't funny then. It is now. Okay. I also loved what cancer taught me about myself. Random is good. Randomness can be the best thing. Unexpected, uncomfortable situations can bring out the best in people and the most creative thinking. You learn the most from the things you initially find terrifying or maybe don't even think of at all. I know this is trite, but I honestly believe that nothing great comes from comfort zones. Life is all about taking these situations and turning them into something meaningful and unique. Your people are what will get you through. Hey. Oh, I pressed stop, you guys. Oops. Your people are what will get you through. The world revolves around friendships, human connections, and shared experiences. In a digital world, the truly important stuff is still analog. Everything matters. What you think is the most important thing probably isn't. The person you normally don't seek out probably has the best advice. What seems insignificant now could prove to be invaluable 5 years down the road. Don't discount things simply because your focus is on something else. You could be missing the best stuff. I know the most popular slogan tied to it is "fuck cancer," and it is a sentiment that I absolutely share, but how could I not also love something that taught me so many valuable lessons? This is a photo that up until the end I wasn't sure if I was going to add it. It's me coming out of my first surgery, and in that moment I was just so grateful to be alive, and it's a great reminder. Okay. These are called Creative Mornings, and you may be wondering what any of this has to do with creativity, design, Nike, or your own job. So I'm going to move away from cancer and instead speak to how what I learned changed the way I look at my job. Like I said, my job is to keep people inspired, keep people connected, and keep people creative. This can be incredibly hard to do in today's world due to distractions, deadlines, competing agendas, workload, constant input, and great binge watching opportunities to zone out. My experience didn't change my approach to my job completely, but it focused me in different, somewhat profound ways. Earlier, I mentioned that I was pragmatic and strategic. I went from a linear and logical approach to a more random and emotional one. Cancer elevated my ability to help keep people creative. I came back to work with a new outlook, and due to that, tackled the problems that my designers faced in a slightly different way than I would have before. I also didn't want to spend my time on things that I didn't fully believe in. Here's where it all comes together. One of the best parts of my job is to bring in speakers from the larger creative world, and I generally went with very obvious design options. Everybody loves, and rightly so, great known graphic designers like Stefan Sagmeister or industrial designers like Ross Lovegrove. These are amazing individuals who had a wonderful impact, but they were also considered to be the expected and somewhat predictable. I began to think more outside the box and brought in some of that randomness that cancer had taught me to embrace. I began choosing speakers that people wouldn't necessarily be interested on their own. People like Tom Sachs, who can be a total wild card, but ended up being a perfect fit, offering up the idea of using emotive versus linear logic to our designers. Or, what if I brought in a group of 6 Tibetan monks that I knew were going to be in Portland? They had so much insight to lend from a very different perspective. I've never gotten as much positive feedback as I did from our designers having them in residence for 3 days. They spent their time creating this beautifully intricate mandala that once finished, they immediately and ceremonially swept away and spoke to the idea of impermanence. I had just had my own personal experience with the topic, but this idea of impermanence is a universal truth. It's something designers face every day. Hard work being scrapped, the ego being tied up in something we manifest and create, months of hard work being shelved indefinitely. Nike has gotten so big that there are literally hundreds of people who don't know each other. I love to create small and large experiences for these designers to work and engage. The old Allyn likely would have solely focused on hitting as many people with one event as possible, or maybe even looked to online means to get these 700 people in connection with each other. It would have been easier to focus on larger scale, wide-spanning approaches to capture them. But cancer taught me the importance of connection. Relationships are key. I heard somebody say recently that culture eats strategy for lunch. I have to say that I agree, and I would add on to that relationships define culture. I want there to be meaning and engagement in the experiences I create, and those are the ones I focus on. One of my favorites is a program we call Supper Club. It's where we curate a group of 10 to 12 designers and take them into the working space of a local creative where they sit around a salon-style dinner and engage in conversation. I honestly believe that I work at the best company and with the best people. I spend a lot of my time talking to designers, listening to what they want and need in order to feel happy and fulfilled. I will continue to do whatever I can to keep them in love with design, and I'm really excited to see where it all goes. One of the best parts of my job is that it is forever evolving, and I never quite know where it will take me. I am less focused on a singular idea and have cast a wider net, and it has become so much more interesting. My manager showed me this photo when I was talking to him about this topic, and it really resonated with me. The idea of being a first responder was about as foreign to me as that as a perfectly healthy 34-year-old woman being diagnosed with cancer. We have a predisposition to avoid conflict and hardship when and where possible. It is also easier in a lot of ways to pretend that scary things aren't happening to us as opposed to facing them head on. There is some really scary shit in the world, and we are programmed on a genetic level to run away from danger. But the people who can run towards danger instead of away from it are usually the ones who do the most good and are definitely the ones who are the most interesting. In many ways, this photo was me and how I reacted to my cancer diagnosis. I don't suggest running towards a burning building or a Donald Trump rally, but you get the point. More political references. Chase what you love and you will find yourself. Just keep in mind that what you end up loving may be the scariest thing that you could possibly imagine. And that is what brought me here today. Thank you. Thanks, guys. I do have time, since I went through that so fast. If anybody has any questions about anything, I'm happy to answer them. Yes, you.
You talk about the priority of an analog existence. How do you balance that with the digital world that is at our eyes all day, eyes and ears?
I mean, I think you have to choose your battles. There are so many parts of life that you can't get away from being digital. We're so connected by having our phone in our hands at all times. I mean, it's small things, like when I'm at dinner, I try and put my phone face down or even don't take it out. Or for designers, getting away from your computer and walking away and actually crafting something with your hands. Or, you know, we sit in cubicles or around groups of people, but how often do you actually turn to your left or your right and say, hi? How many people do you even know that you sit next to all the time, but you're solely focused on your screen? So I guess it's just making a conscious effort to look away from your screen, whether it's your computer, your TV, or your phone. And it always feels good. You'll never feel bad about doing that. Yes.
What do you think the designers loved about what the monks shared with them?
I think there was something just calming about their energy in general, and they come from such a, the world of design is creating things. So people are making, they're creating, they're problem solving. And these monks are also creating something, but all of the ego is completely stripped away. It is purely an act of making something beautiful and then wiping it away to show that nothing is permanent. So I think especially in a product-based company, when you are making something for sale and you're working against a business and you're creating ideas, it was just really refreshing to see somebody creating something just for it to be beautiful in that moment. And people responded to that, and it was great. I wish we could have kept them forever. Yes?
You, in medicine, you kind of approach through a unique lens with your design experience. And I'm curious with kind of how sterile and how procedural and, like you say, maybe pragmatic the medical world is. With your experience with breast cancer, did you feel like there was opportunity? Did you either experience people helping you with resources for creative expression, or did you have an interest in doing that? I know you mentioned you were just surviving, but was that a need during the time you were fighting cancer?
For me, I actually had a really amazing experience with cancer, and I approached it. The surgeon I chose her because halfway through her career, she herself was diagnosed with breast cancer. So she had a very human approach to it as well. And I went into it understanding the importance of the science aspect, but also wanting to hold the hand of my spiritual self through this weird journey too. And I paired up personally with a naturopath and looked at it from a very holistic point of view. I also had a great support system of friends. As far as a creative outlet, no. I mean, I tried to do one of the coloring books, but it's not really my thing. I actually, if I'm completely honest, to prepare for it, and Cass can attest to this, I watched this horrible show called Botched. And it was like the worst surgery mishaps that could ever happen. And that made me feel better about being in Portland, Oregon and having cancer here and being in the best hands. But I think it is. I think if you go at it from solely a scientific point of view, you're going to come out of it not feeling as complete as I did. And I specifically chose a team that looked at it from all points of view. And I had the best people around me too. So, yes, Cecilia.
Do you feel like your relationships with the people in your life changed, not from how you viewed them, but from how they viewed you?
I don't know. You tell me. I think some of them, yes. I was talking this morning about how I have this strange thing where half of me is so open about my experience with cancer, and yet there are also people I know and have known for years that don't even know I had it. I think you touch grace a little bit in any situation where there is even the slightest chance that you can die. And I think that leaves an imprint on not only yourself, but the people that know you, and hopefully in some ways opens the viewpoint that we're not here forever. Time is limited. How do you stay in the moment? How everyone is going to die. We all know that, but the fact that it can be any time, any day is terrifying, and it kind of, I think it makes you appreciate the people more. I don't know. People seem to think I have better life advice now, but I'm not sure how true that is. I don't know if that answered your question. Yes?
What are you chasing now?
Oh, geez. I think I'm still chasing. I feel like this is kind of the final phase in my whole cancer thing. I mean, I was diagnosed last August, so it still hasn't even been a year. And this feels like a great kind of closing step to end that journey. And I don't know what I will be chasing yet. It's kind of exciting. I get to decide that. But I will continue. I don't know. I'll keep you posted. I'll tweet it when I figure it out or something. That wasn't a very good answer. Sorry. I should have prepared for that. Yes.
So you said that you now try to be more adventurous in how you're programming for your team.
Yes.
What do you find in terms of, like, as soon as you move away from name recognition
Mm-hmm.
and the people that folks recognize that are their heroes,
Yep.
they aspire to be, but you're trying to create more of like a liberal arts experience where you're edifying your team with things they may not know anything about, how do you motivate people to engage with something that they don't necessarily know about?
I mean, I think sometimes we trick them into it. We have a few different programs, and we're lucky at Nike. We have an entire website just dedicated to designers. So it's kind of like the happenings and what's going on. And I think if you seed people with information, they're much more open to new ideas and new experiences than they initially thought. I think our biggest wall that we run up against is time constraints. Like, people are so busy. How do you get them to step away from what they are paid to do and expected to do to be inspired? So that's been almost a larger challenge than the receptiveness of people into something new. But you definitely, yeah, I mean, Stefan Sagmeister, just say his name and people will show up. For other more obscure people, you do have to share a little bit more information, but I find once people see it, something clicks, and it might not be everybody, it might not be 300 Nike designers, but if we get 75, that's just as good if it hits them in a special spot. A special spot. I said that. Jesus. And then it went downhill. Okay. Anybody else? I'm full of knowledge, people. I'm getting comfortable up here now. I like it. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming. Oh, never mind. Hi.
Elaborate a little bit more on the supper club concept, kind of how you
Sure.
put that together and how it runs.
Sure. So we do a lot of large scaling approaches for all of our designers, and I always felt like there was kind of this miss in between these small experiences that are more intimate. So we came up with this theory of like a salon style dinner for 10 to 12 designers that we would handpick based on the local creative we went to. And we've done people like Michael Curry in his design studio, Michelle Lesniak was in that photo, Jeff Cavell, who's with Skylab. So depending on the creative we choose, that will define the group that we pick to go along with that. And I always try and do, you know, a mix of people who have been at Nike a long time versus people who might have been hired within the last 6 months. You want to get the group so that it's people who probably wouldn't come in contact with each other otherwise. And as opposed to something where, you know, the point of it is to learn or to learn a new skill set or to create, this is all about conversation and connection. And all you have to do is show up and you sit down and you eat dinner together. And I think there's something so connective about sharing a meal that it immediately breaks down any boundaries and it just creates this special bond. And I'm now on like 3 different email chains of those groups that kind of continue to hang out outside of work. So it's really fulfilling. It's really fulfilling to connect people and watch the relationship grow. It's just a really special experience. Mm-hmm. Last call. Oh, yes.
So, do you have any thoughts on how to run towards or move towards some of the bigger, scary things like climate change?
I did bring politics into this conversation. I think, you know, in general, like anything, it is horrifying to think about climate change, and it is easier to assume that somebody else will fix the problem. And I find myself doing this sometimes with, things happening even on a Portland level, where I don't need to do that because someone else will do that, or I don't have the time because I'm busy at work. Someone else will have the time to do that. However, if I'm thinking that, chances are 8 of 10 other people are also thinking that. So I think it's just making the decision to be conscious, and if everybody can change their own behavior, then that turns into a larger collective behavioral change. And I think talking about things helps. And I think a lot of times we get combative, and nobody likes to feel like they're being attacked or their ideas are being attacked. So if you can approach things from a more understanding and open-minded point of view and engage in discussion versus battling of the minds, I think that is a good place to start. And just being aware, having the facts. Don't watch Fox News. That's what I would say to that. Anyone else? Oh, yep.
My question's about defining success from your role, kind of building off the supper club question. You said you see lasting relationships and connections.
Yeah.
Are there any other physical ways that you've seen success coming out of sort of a, more creative role like yours, where you're responsible for inspiration? It's probably a little hard to track and measure all the time what it means. Is there just any other ways that you like?
Yeah, I mean, that's just one of several programs that we do. We have another one that's called All Access, where it's when we gather about 25 designers and we'll have them in an unplugged session with a Nike design leader that's been around for a long time. Like we've had Mark Parker and Tinker Hatfield. I think anytime you break down the barrier of people feeling like they're in this alone and in kind of this one lane and have no way to bridge out of it or break out of it, that in itself is helpful. I think mentorships are formed through programs like this. When we have workshops in the makerspace, we've learned that women are less likely to come and join a workshop alone or to go and try and navigate using a new piece of equipment. So we're looking at how do we engage women to get them there the first time and break the first experience, because then they'll come back, but they're much more likely to visit in a group versus solo. I think connection is where everything starts, especially in a company like Nike, where it's so relationship driven, and it is amazing. I feel as though you will be so surprised when you go to talk to people and ask them for help, or see if they'll meet you for 30 minutes to just discuss your career path or see what your options are. And these programs are just a way to kind of bridge the gap between sending a cold call email to somebody you don't know and actually being able to sit across from them or take part in a workshop with them face to face and have that connection built in. So it's kind of a jumping off point. Anyone else? All right, for real this time, last call. Okay, thank you so much for coming.